Welcome to the Successful Athletes Podcast presented by TrainerRoad, where we interview successful athletes to make you a faster cyclist. And today we are joined by somebody who's actually not too physically far from me, of course, very socially distanced, but just the same, Stephen Morina. How you doing, Stephen?
Good to meet you.
Yeah, likewise, man. Good to have you on here. So where are you from, first of all, since I already kind of leaked that a little bit?
Well, I'm originally from New Jersey, but I'm currently living in Napa Valley, in a little town called St. Helena, halfway up the valley. And I'm working at a winery. I help make wine.
That's awesome. So we're going to dig right into that. And But now that I know that you live in St. Helena or Santa Elena or St. Helena, I don't even know how to say it, but I've stayed there like probably 5 times and ridden out of there as my base camp.
Yeah.
And one of the best climbs ever extends directly from that little town and goes over to Santa Rosa, and not a lot of people know about it.
Yeah, Spring Mountain Road.
Yes, it's so good.
It's good. It's a steep climb, but it's a good climb. Yeah,
it's amazing. We used to do some team camps with the team that I was on. We would do team camps up there, and there's a huge house up at the top of the hill, and it was a really big team. Mm-hmm. So we would rent out that house, and all of us would be up there. Pre-COVID days, man. Thinking back to that brings the nostalgia back.
Yeah.
We'll get into riding.
Place to ride.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah. And we have to touch on that before we end. And I have that down in my notes a little bit. So we'll touch on that before we end. But first things first, I want to get into your work because I think it's super interesting. A lot of people are probably interested in it. What's the nature of your work as a cellar worker in one of the wine capitals of the world?
So I pretty much take everything from receiving the grapes. So we have a full-time vineyard crew. They tend to the vineyard, and come harvest, we're receiving the grapes in on giant pallets, about 2,000 pounds a pallet, and we process them, we ferment them, we put them to barrel, and then we take care of the whole process, everything until bottle. And then after that, it's kind of taken care of by another set of people, but we're essentially from grapes to bottle, we take care of that whole process. So it's a small group of 4 of us, and then a cellar master, and then a winemaker above us. So,
that has to be a ton of work.
It's a ton of standing, and harvest is pretty hectic. Trying to balance riding during harvest, during 12-hour days, where you're constantly running, and it can be a lot of work. But it's super fun just to be able to create and drink wine as well.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned long days there. First of all, let's start at the harvest schedule. When does harvesting happen? And then what is a normal day outside of harvest in terms of work demands? And then what's a normal day during the harvesting period?
So during harvest, normal day would start. Depends when the vineyard crew is picking. So that all depends on weather, but most of the time it's 5 to 6 a.m. Luckily, I live 3 minutes away from work. So I don't have to wake up too early, but I'm in there and on a forklift about 5 or 6 a.m. And from that, it just depends on what I'm doing for the day. Most of the time I'm running a production line. So we have a crew that we bring in that sits on the production line and essentially does quality control. And there's a lot of machines that it goes through, and then it goes into tank. And then I have to take care of those tanks, check fermentations of tanks. And obviously the beginning of harvest is really easy. You're just doing 1 tank and then maybe two or 3 tanks a day. And then on top of that, now you have 3 tanks to monitor while you're processing tanks. So it builds on each other. So it really does ramp up, kind of ramps up for white, and then it starts to die down for the white. And as that's dying down, the red grapes start to come in, and that ramps up. And that's where it gets pretty hectic, where you have all the white wines kind of finishing fermentation, but you're still bringing in all the red wines, and it can be it can be pretty crazy. I'd say most days 10 to 12 hours. So That's during harvest. Once harvest dies down, it goes to an 8-hour work week, like normal. I still come in at 6 a.m. and I'm lucky that I get to leave at 2:30 because of that. We've kind of all 4 of us have agreed that we'd rather be in at 6 and get done where there's still daylight, and it works out perfectly for me. I get to ride more. So, yeah, so the non-harvest days are a little bit slower. But again, it's manual labor. It's not, I think a lot of people think that winemaking is very glamorous and sit around tasting wine all day. And although that does happen every once in a while, it's mostly physical labor, cleaning barrels, washing barrels, pulling wine in and out of tanks, out of barrels. So it's can be physically demanding for sure.
When does harvest happen and how long does that last?
For us, so it all depends on so white grapes come in earlier. If you're doing sparkling wine, they come in even earlier. For us, it starts around mid-August is when we bring in our first Sauvignon Blanc. And then harvest tends to end around late September. And it can be pushed longer and longer. It just, again, depends on the style of wine you want to make. Yeah, I think this year we got done sometime around mid-September, right before the fires that I'm sure you were aware of. Yeah, it's a couple hectic months of harvest, and it can be stretched pretty long. This year it was kind of condensed. Our winemaker made the decision of kind of picking a little bit earlier, and it seemed to pay off because we finished picking on a Friday, and then the big fires that the second set of fires that really took off and burned throughout Napa this year happened 2 days later. So we were lucky to have everything in, but you could go to another winery and they could have 50% of their crop still out in the field, and that's completely destroyed. Some wineries didn't even do a vintage this year. So it all depends. So it can be a long process, and the fire season was definitely interesting with that. Yeah.
So this sounds like a job that is physically demanding, but also somewhat variable or and maybe unpredictable isn't the right word, but you're not doing the same thing every day, in the sense that it's not like you can just count on, you walk in at 8 a.m. and you sit and you work and then you leave at that time. So that all those things to me sound like it's got to be tough to be able to work in a balance with work, life, training, any other responsibilities you have. What are like the family responsibilities or other responsibilities you have outside of work and training?
So I live with my girlfriend, just in a small apartment. So responsibilities outside of that, luckily, isn't too much. I literally during harvest would come home and would eat and maybe stay up for like I would come home, I would ride, and then I would eat and maybe stay up for 30 minutes and literally not be able to stay awake any longer, and probably go to bed around 8:30. And then
sounds
do
like
it all again.
Sounds like an athlete's life in that regard of going to bed early,
Yeah. And it's not because you want to, it's you physically can't anymore. So you can't stay up.
It's a great way to get faster too, more sleep. Yeah. Although you're getting up early, so it cuts off the other end of it. So what about cycling? When did you start with cycling? What's your cycling history like?
So I started cycling in 2017. I kind of was cycling casually, right? My brother is a really good cyclist. And when I originally moved to Napa in 17, I started cycling with him a bit, and I never really did like I was definitely like riding kind of for fun, and then it kind of picked up more and more. And then, you know, my brother was so much better than me. He's a lot shorter, a lot lighter. So he kill me on the climbs, and I'm, you know, anything around here, if you're not going in the valley, it's a climb. So I definitely have a competitive nature of wanting to keep up with him. So as that happened, you know, I got better. But I never really did any sort of sense of training. I just rode to ride. And we would do like 40-mile rides a century every once in a while type thing. So yeah, that was kind of my experience with riding. I just did it for fun. And then kind of took a break. And then around, what was that? Late 2019, I got a trainer. I ended up jumping on TrainerRoad probably a week or so after, and stuck to that for, well, until now. So just over a year or so, and ended up continuing doing that.
What drove you to that? Like, what drove you to do structure? Because a lot of people ride bikes casually, even not so casually, but they don't do structured training. So what was your why?
To get better. It was, so in Napa in the winter, we have a lot of rain. So just for instance, now we've probably had 4 days straight of rain. So there's not really much riding outside, and I wanted to get better. And I figured, like, if I'm going to ride inside, I'm going to just get the biggest bang for my buck. Right. Yeah. So I kind of found, like, if I'm going to ride inside, I want the biggest bang for my buck. And, TrainerRoad is kind of what I decided on. And it was, you know, again, with the plan builder and everything, it's like, it was nice to have that, like, set it and forget it. And then I could just, like, come home. I know exactly what I have. I just hop on. You know, the one thing that was really important to me, especially coming home during harvest and everything, is, like, have everything set up. You know, have all the clothes laid out, and, you know, the bottle of water in the fridge already. And so the second I get home, because if you sit down, you get tired and you get complacent. So just hop on the trainer, even though you may not feel like you want to. And then just once you start cycling for like 5-10 minutes, that you kind of get that all goes away and you're in it. Right.
Yeah. What other things have you, and we'll backtrack in just a bit into kind of like the baseline for where you were at when you started with structure, but since you're on this point, I'd like to ask, what other things have you done to make sure that you can stay consistent amidst the craziness of work and the fatigue and everything else that you experience? Are there other things that you did, like you mentioned, putting the bottle already in there, the kit there, the bike on? What other things have you done to make sure that you get the workout done? What have you done to make your life easier in that way?
To get the workout done, day to day, I think that's kind of the main driver. And I think if you're, you know, it's nice to have, like, to figure out what your fix is, as far as, like, if it's music or if it's watching videos or something that kind of keeps you engaged. So it's not kind of just mindless riding. So a lot of the times, you know, if I have like 10 minutes during the day, I'll just, like, go through YouTube and kind of queue up a bunch of YouTube videos. And I know my workouts are either going to be an hour or an hour and a half long. And I'll just, like, okay, I can do like 4 videos of 20 minutes and that gets me through it. So knowing that, like, I'm going to be engaged and having all that set up is really, like, the day-to-day thing I need to keep me engaged. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. As far as, like, keeping me engaged long-term, which I think is equally, if not more important, it's just kind of understanding when, and it always takes a bunch of trial and error of figuring out, you know, kind of when your body's speaking to you, that's like, take a break or go outside or change up the workout, and kind of figure out, like, if it's going to be a prolonged process that you're going for, you got to keep it fun. You can't just ride because you want to get faster. It has to be, you have to enjoy the process along the way. So don't. So I found that if I was getting a little complacent, maybe I would go outside and take one of the workouts outside. That seems to really help as well. Or maybe, every once in a while I'll do some group rides. And I tended to pick some of those up more and more as I moved along, and kind of learned, you kind of have to learn to balance the group ride with, if you're going to substitute it, you have to learn to balance that group ride with the substitution. And that helps as well. Once you start interacting with other people, and obviously that has kind of happened less and less recently, but when you learn to balance that, you can still continue to get better, and prolong the whole process.
What was your starting point in terms of FTP and weight? And then what did you end up at? And then we'll backtrack through and talk about the training that you followed.
I want to say 195, something like that. And I was 210 pounds. I'm 6'4". Cool. So I think it was, I don't know the quick math, but what is that? 2.2 watts per kilogram or something.
Yep.
And in that year, I managed to get to 303 FTP and bring my weight down to, I'm hovering between 170 and 175. And I put on a little winter weight to 180. I'm at 180 right now because I'm not riding outside a ton. Don't need to go up mountains fast. I figured, it doesn't hurt to put on a couple more weight if that might carry over to a little bit more a bigger engine too. So I think a part of that whole year-long process is becoming okay with your fluctuations in body weight as well. And I previously went through kind of that first year in 2017. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was thought like power to weight ratio, but I didn't have a power meter. So it's like the weight's the only factor. So I definitely made the mistake of dieting too hard. I dropped to like 165, which is not where I realized my body needed to be. And luckily I have this hill, not into Santa Rosa, but out the other way. And it's a 5-minute segment that Levi Leifheimer has the KOM on that. And I think Stetna has the second or something like that. Those two pretty much have every KOM here. And it was this 5-minute segment, and I was like at my skinniest, at my best, what I thought my best was then. And I think I did it in like 5.5 minutes. And as I was doing TrainerRoad, I think it was after base 2. I've been low volume the whole time. After base 2, I went out. This was still as I was going down. I think I was probably like 180, 185. And I knocked a minute off of my best time. So I realized that at that time, I was 20% faster. And say I was 185, I was 20 pounds more. And I realized at that moment that the weight is not the driving factor at all. And you need to get that out of your head. And my eating habits changed. And I think, and my body kind of found the weight that it wanted to be at. And that is like 170, 175. And then just go for the power, figure how much you can get from that.
That's the best way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 195 to 303, I think you said. Mm-hmm. That's super impressive. Huge amount of improvement that you had there. You also went through the experience of weight loss, and then you also had the experience, of course, of realizing there's a sweet spot for your weight to hit. But what training plans did you follow throughout that? And how did you, like, what volume did you follow and what sort of adjustments did you have to make all throughout?
Yeah, so I've been low volume the entire time. And I've kind of found, I think it's best to stick to the lowest volume plan that you can stick to. It's not good to say, oh, I think I can do mid volume and then just throw away, like, oh, this week I'm just going to take one off. It's better to stick to that plan and then add on top. So if for me, I would do the 3 rides a week, and then, you know, if I was feeling good or just wanted extra miles, those gap days, I would do an easy spin, you know, maybe a recovery ride for like 20 miles or so. And yeah, so I've been mid volume. So I did base, sweet spot base, 1, 2, and then sustained power build, low volume. So yeah. And then after that, harvest hit that year. So it was difficult to, I at the end of that build, that build was hard. Going the first time into that build, it was hard, and I knew that I was not going to be able to do a specialty and continue and pick up harvest at the same time. So what I did was I jumped back to low volume sweet spot base 1 again. So I just did that and then jumped back. And as harvest kind of picked up, I would have to I had to come to accept that I was kind of going to lose a little bit. And that's just the way it is. But I tried my best to figure out how to lose the least amount of fitness. And I posted on the forums, I've posted on the Facebook page, and a little bit of trial and error over a week or so. And for me, I found it was best. I couldn't do the hour workouts after, 12 hours working. I found that if I could get on and ride for 30 minutes every day, that was something that was sustainable for me. So I was ending up getting the same amount of time on the bike, but 30 minutes was a lot easier for me just to get on. It felt a lot quicker and it was a lot more sustainable. And that's something that really helped me. And then once harvest died off, then I kind of jumped back into base 1, base 2, and then build again. Yeah.
That's awesome. So I love that principle of doing something rather than nothing, even though it feels like, oh man, this is far off from what was prescribed. It's what you can do. And it's super important to make those adjustments. And then I love the concept that you shared of doing the low volume plan, because it's the plan you can stick to and you can nail with consistency. Yeah. And that's just, I mean, I know I sound like a broken record because I'm always saying that, but it is so important to not just shoot for the stars with the highest one. Having one that you can actually do is hugely important. Then you also mentioned incorporating group rides, and that low volume plan allows you to be able to do that. What sort of nutritional changes did you make? You mentioned that you went through this experience of dropping a lot of weight and then finding that point where you are much more sustainable and stable and more healthy and powerful. But what sort of nutritional changes were involved in that whole process?
A bunch. So early on, when I was like 210, just starting, I guess made the mistake of going full keto. I had gone keto to lose weight before, and for me personally, it works really well. And it again, keto on top of riding a lot worked really well for a couple weeks. And those couple weeks I lost a decent amount of weight, and then you realize like you're tired all the time and you'd hop on and it's just like, even on the bike, I was just like, I wasn't feeling like I couldn't complete the rides. It was a feeling that I was literally falling asleep during the ride. And it just, it it didn't feel right to me.
Energy.
And I didn't. So it didn't really work out. I guess with that low of power, it may work for a very short amount of time, but in the long run, it's not sustainable at all. So then I would start introducing carbs into my workouts, leading, the day before, like that dinner before, I would introduce carbs to that. And again, that worked to a certain extent. And then at some point I kind of got in the mindset of, all right, my body's going down as far as weight. And I'm just going to eat when I feel like eating. And I think I listened to one of y'all's podcasts, and Pete was talking about it. And he was like, he has portion control issues, just like I do. And as long as you eat healthy food, you can, for me, I could eat as much as I want of healthy food and my body weight would still go down. So cutting out all the sugar, cutting out all that stuff. But if you're eating, eat as much vegetables as you want, eat as much fruit as you want. And that's what I would get full off of. If I wanted something sweet or a dessert like that, I would have, pineapple, strawberries. That for me kind of satisfied that dessert. And my body would kind of found that it kind of just kept trending down, and I would just continue to eat as much as I want, and it leveled off at 170, 175. And I said, this is where my body wants to be. I'm eating good. I'm eating as much as I feel like my body's asking, and that's where it should be. So that's kind of the process that I went through. Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. So I want to ask another thing. What have you found that you are not good at in the training process? It doesn't have to be like a specific type of intensity, like as much as what things always stand as stumbling blocks to you. Like one for me, for example, is scheduling my workouts. I don't prioritize them well enough. And then as a result, they always get fit in between everything. And then that causes me to either miss workouts or do something less than what I had planned. So that sort of thing. Or it could be nutrition. It could be sleep. It could be recovery. It could be focus. It could be any number of different things. What have you found that you are not particularly good at in the training process?
Sleep can be hard. And it definitely was early on for sure. My girlfriend was working in the restaurant industry, and they work late hours. So she was working to midnight, 1 a.m, and I would wake up at 6 and work till, 2:30 or during harvest a lot later. So if I wanted to see her at all, I need to stay up. And I was operating probably on like 5 hours of sleep, and that really wasn't sustainable. So learning, my body kind of started to adapt, and it said, you're not staying up this late anymore. And that kind of brought that back. And I'm lucky for that. And I think that was definitely one of it. What else? I guess balancing group rides early on, group rides with that hour and a half ride at the end of the week that I had scheduled was definitely something challenging. The guys that I ride with are really strong guys. And it's definitely easy to get to overdo it. And there was definitely times that I had to tell myself, like, can't go on this group ride this week. Like I want to stick to this plan for this week. And for me, I found that rest weeks were the most important for that. They would always want to go on these long, most weekend rides that we did were 60, 70 miles, and, pushing it. And I knew in those rest weeks, like you can't do that. That's the week that your body really gets strong. It recovers. So that was a big challenge for me, just to say like, I'd love to do it. I want to go outside. I want to do that. But if I want to get faster, I'm taking that weekend off, or I'm riding easy that weekend, and kind of learn to balance that, even though you might want to be out there.
Yeah. Now you've raised your FTP from 197 to 303. It's about 2.4 to 3.8 watts per kilogram is the change, which is super impressive.
Yeah.
So clearly you're also good at things as well. What things have you found that you're particularly good at, or do you think that you have learned to be good at in the training process?
Listening to my body, as previously mentioned, for the food, that's really important. And kind of setting yourself up that even though you may not be motivated to get on, but making sure that you have everything set up ahead of time, that really helps. I'm sorry. What was the question again? I kind of got sidetracked.
Yeah, no problem. It's, what are you particularly good at? We talked about what you are, what you've learned and you've gotten better at, but what things are you particularly good at? Because clearly you're good. You've made a lot of improvement.
Yeah. I think kind of trusting that in the plan. Mm-hmm. I know it sounds silly, but I think it's when you don't see results immediately, it can be discouraging. And I think people have experienced this through any particular thing that they do, not just riding. You know, you're not going to get that result immediately. And kind of just sticking to a plan and trusting it, that really helps. Yeah, I guess I'm a somewhat of a competitive person. So being on those group rides and trying to keep up with the guys that are faster than me, and making sure I wasn't last. I mean, that you either learn to get dropped or you learn to get faster. And, yeah, I learned to get faster. So that was definitely a pushing factor as well.
For sure. So what are your goals now with cycling? Amidst, you have the balancing act of training and all this stuff, but we haven't really talked about what your aspirations are, what keeps you going with it.
Yeah. I guess my somewhat short-term goal, I'd like to get to 4 watts per kilo. Nice. And I think I'm pretty close to that. And I don't really I'm not really, I've never really set hard dates. Like I need to be 4 watts per kilo in 3 months, right? Mm-hmm. Just trust the plan. All you can do is get faster and faster. And if you do a test and you gain a watt, take it, and continue. I'm not really sure. I haven't done any criterium racing. I know that there's a lot of it around here in Santa Rosa. Maybe get into different disciplines. I know my boss is a good cyclist too, and he's getting into the gravel scene. So maybe I'll dabble in that a little bit. There's great mountain biking here. I haven't really figured out what that long-term goal is going to be, but I don't have a strong urge to need much more, as long as I'm just making sure I'm focusing on what's in front of me now, and taking those little goals one at a time. Then at some point I can look back and say, whoa, I made all this progress, and that was my goal, I guess, at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. And it's that sort of step of progress that you can constantly take, where cycling becomes so rewarding for us. Mm-hmm. I got to close this one out by asking you for favorite climb in the region around Napa. And I know if you're listening to this and you're listening to this over in Europe or Australia or China or wherever else you're listening to this, I know that you probably don't know the names of these climbs or everything else, but Napa is definitely a destination location. If you ever want to do a cycling vacation, it's incredible.
It is.
The cycling is incredible. The food, the culture, it's great. So, but with that, what's your favorite climb? And then what route would you send a visitor on that wanted an awesome cycling route?
There's this climb up, it's in Calistoga, so northern part of Napa Valley, called Old Toll Road. It's actually not a particularly well-paved road. I wouldn't recommend riding 25s on it. But the best part about it is there's a road that goes alongside of it, called 29, which is the main road that goes up Napa. And then it goes up this mountain to, goes up Mount St. Helena, even though it's in Calistoga, but it's a perfectly paved road. And being able to bomb that descent is the most fun that I've ever had. So I would recommend that. And the climb's pretty short. I think it takes like 20, 25 minutes, depending on, how fast you climb. But it's, 4 miles or so. And so that would be probably one of my favorite climbs in Napa. As far as a route goes, going south to a place called Rutherford, and you can go out to these lakes called Lake Hennessy and then Lake Berryessa. You can ride out there. It's pretty dead, it's pretty desolate, and good climbs. I like to do that. And then you can actually, once you go out to Lake Hennessy, you can go up north through Pope Valley, and then you can climb up this mountain called Howell Mountain, and then descend into St. Helena. So that's a good one because you're kind of going up over the mountain ridge, right along the other side in Pope Valley, which is east of Napa Valley, and then you come back over into Napa Valley. And that's really good. That's kind of a bread and butter of mine.
All the Cliff Bar racing athletes listening to this podcast right now are smiling because that's where we do team camp every year with them. Yeah. And it's a great spot to do it. So that's awesome. Steven, way to go. Super impressive job on getting close to 4 watts per kilo from 2.4 and onward and upward from here. You're close to 4. It's super exciting.
Thank you.
If people want to ask you questions, what's the best way, on the TrainerRoad forum or something like Instagram?
Facebook would probably be the best. Just on they can tag my name. Cool. And I can respond there. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, in that case, thanks a bunch, Steven. If you're listening to this podcast right now and you want to share your story of how you've used TrainerRoad to achieve some level of success, you can do so at trainerroad.com/SAP. And if you're also listening to this podcast, please rate it, give it 5 stars and thumbs up if you're watching this on YouTube. All that sort of thing helps it so that other cyclists can discover it and hopefully find some tips here from Steven that are going to help them get faster, just like they've helped you. So with that said, thanks everybody. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.